At least 20 residents evacuated the town today, and more are expected to leave over the weekend. The area is still underwater from Tropical Storm Francis, which dumped rain on the area last weekend.
The water is so nasty and everything, and you can catch diseases. You know, I mean, I don't want my kids in this. I just brought them home yesterday because I thought it was all over with.
If needed, law enforcement agencies and the Red Cross will be on hand for flood victims in that area all weekend long. It seems we've been getting quite a few heavy storms lately, and those storms are beginning to take their toll on shrimpers in Morgan City. They tell us their harvest for the past 3 weeks has been very scarce. Shrimpers say as soon as the high waters start to recede, another storm blows in. They say if this continues, the price of shrimp could go up.
And along that line, sugarcane farmers in our area are watching all of this very closely as well. Many sugarcane farmers, like Plaquemine farmer John Gay, lost parts of his crop to the drought and again to the Tropical Storm Francis. With the ground already saturated, more rain and wind could cause Louisiana's best crop this year to deteriorate. Last year, it was a $500 million record crop, which had a $1.4 billion impact on the state's economy. Farmers are hopeful they can harvest the cane in the next several weeks before another storm comes our way and damages it.
The Shintech Corporation is wasting no time trying to win the hearts of residents in Iberville and West Baton Rouge parishes. After announcing a plan to move out of St. James Parish, company representatives met with community leaders this morning. They say plans to build a $250 million plastics plant on Highway 1 will not affect residents' health or safety. A spokesman for Shintech says they learned a lesson in St. James Parish.
I think the key lesson we learned is that we need to start very early in the communication before we make complete our permit application to make sure that the people have had an opportunity to be involved.
Reaction to the announcement has been mixed among the residents in West Baton Rouge and Iberville parishes. Some feel the plant will be good for the economy. Others are still concerned about safety.
Well, the plot continues to thicken for former Governor.
Talking to Candy and Stephen talking to Leslie and, you know, Edwin talking to Marion and everything else. We got to work through all that and figure out which parts we think are useful. And
now, Edwards' attorneys say they expect the indictments in the next few weeks. And we'll have more on this at 6 o'clock. We'll also have the federal prosecutor's side, John.
All right. Thank you, Avery. And now the troubles lingering over President Clinton. Members of the House Judiciary Committee are trying to decide whether to delay the release of the videotape of the president's grand jury testimony. The Republicans are expected to make the tape public as early as tomorrow. Meanwhile, House Republicans are asking the FBI to investigate what they believe may be White House efforts to intimidate members of Congress by digging up dirt. This after an internet report detailing an extramarital affair by Judiciary Committee Chairman Henry Hyde. The article was published by Salon magazine. The editor says he's trying to level the playing field. He says what's good for those presidents is good for those sitting in judgment on him. Well, back here at home, former LSU football star Cecil Collins is paying another high price for his alleged indiscretions. McNeese State has kicked Collins off their football team. That's after Collins failed a court-ordered drug test. The 21-year-old tailback had been free on bond for 2 alleged assaults on young women. He had already been kicked off LSU's team. And the battle to keep Shintech out of St. James Parish is apparently over. Instead, the company is pulling out and preparing to move to Plaquemine, where Shintech hopes to build a $250 million facility near Dow Chemical. If the company gets its way, this cane field bordering Highway 1 and Choctaw Road will be the site of the polyvinyl plastics plant. The announcement is a big victory for some residents in St. James Parish who battled for years to keep Shintech from locating there. Shintech officials say they plan to involve Iberville Parish residents in every step of the permitting process.
We plan to implement a very, very aggressive community outreach program, utilize Dow's Citizens Advisory Panel to help provide input to both Dow and Shintech.
Some local residents and Iberville Parish officials were caught off guard by Shintech's plans. Barbara McGraw has more on their story tonight at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Pat. A potentially historic fight over chemical plants in poor communities has taken a sudden turn tonight. Shintech proposes to build a new plastics plant in Iberville Parish instead of Convent. The company wants to locate on Highway 1 near Plaquemine across from Dow Chemical. And that's where Marvin McGraw is standing by live with the first part of a team report tonight. Marvin?
Well, for years, Shintech and Dow Chemical have worked closely together in Texas. So when things got too hot in St. James Parish, the company decided to try and move its plant here.
We're going to have the kinds of communities that we want to have, not the kinds of communities that our public officials want to cram down our throats.
It's been that spirit of choice that has fueled this fight with the state's government and industrial giant Shintech. And for some of the residents in this small community in rural...
We apologize for that. Let's go back to Marvin McGraw's package. Marvin Hurst's package that you just were beginning to see is part 2 of our team report. So let's go to Marvin's story. Marvin?
The announcement clearly caught many here by surprise.
I just want the people of this parish to know that I did not know anything about this.
If Shintech gets its way, this 300-acre cane field bordering Highway 1 and Choctaw Road will become the site of their new plastics plant.
Well, this is an alternative to the facility in St. James that...
Company spokesman Richard Mason says the $250 million plant will employ 50 people in the manufacture of PCV plastic. He says it will be a third of the size of the proposed plant in Convent.
This is a much smaller project in terms of scope. It's one production facility instead of 3 separate facilities.
The site is near Dow Chemical, which will supply much of the raw material Shintech will use. A Dow spokesman says both companies should be able to operate with a minimum impact on the environment.
We're committed to the goal of helping them find the right emissions to reduce, but we're going to make it a public process.
Shintech says it plans to involve the community in every step of the permitting process.
Our concern is that the production of PVC involves some of the most deadly chemicals known to man.
But many of the same groups that fought the plant in St. James say they plan to fight Shintech in Plaquemine.
They think that by relocating their facility that they can take away the concerns about the project, and they are wrong.
And while some environmental officials oppose the plant, parish officials here in Iberville Parish say they're going to wait and learn more about Shintech before deciding whether or not to support the plant. Back to you, Andy.
Okay, Marvin, thanks a lot. Dave?
Looking back on a little bit of history in this, Shintech's proposal for a $700 million plastics plant actually began a very bitter feud. It pit the state government and big business against some of the residents of St. James Parish. The proposal first surfaced back in October of 1996. Once residents of Convent heard that over 1 billion pounds of polyvinyl chloride would be produced there each year, well, the fight began. Nevertheless, permits were granted to Shintech to build their plant in May of 1997. The outraged residents of St. James Parish started their battle in court with the company back in August of 1997. So our team report continues tonight as this David and Goliath fight appears to have come to an end, or has it? Marvin Hurst now joins us with some of the reactions today from St. James Parish. Marvin?
David, it appears the smoke has cleared from this near 2.5-year battle, but there may still be another battle on the horizon.
We're going to have the kinds of communities that we want to have, not the kinds of communities that our public officials want to cram down our throats.
It's been that spirit of choice that has fueled this fight with the state's government and industrial giant Shintech. And for some of the residents in this small community in rural Louisiana, these fields where the plant would have been built mark the beginning of their end. Now it seems the war they waged against that possibility has ceased.
I think they're going to be extremely disappointed, but more so embarrassed.
Pat Melanson says she has a feeling this is not over.
Shintech still has not said they're not coming to St. James Parish. What they're saying is they're going to be putting this permit on hold while they work on another permit in Plaquemine Parish.
Melanson says now that the smoke is cleared, she only sees a temporary victory. She says this battle against Shintech has just started. But what happens to the community that was on the front line of this battle? Is it too temporarily victorious, or is it a casualty of this war?
We'll move on. The sun will rise tomorrow.
Parish President Dale Email says he doesn't understand why people here fight the potential for their own economic development.
Our unemployment rate is still the highest in the River Parish area, So certainly disappointing in that aspect.
We have lost about 500,000 pounds more of toxic air pollution. We've lost a couple of million gallons of contaminated wastewater going into our drinking water. That's all we've lost.
Now, Malone says they will lock arms with the same people in Plaquemine who helped them in this convent fight against Shintech. So it looks like, David, Andy, this whole thing is not over yet.
It may be a different scale, but the battle is still there.
That's right.
All right, Marvin, thank you very much. Annie?
Well, in other news today, the attorneys for former Governor Edwin Edwards and his son Stephen say no deal tonight.
There has not been a major new plant built between Baton Rouge and New Orleans in 15 years. This American Rhine Valley was once a logical siting for chemical firms. Now global competition, labor rates, and widely varying environmental rules overseas offer companies a choice. 8 years ago, Japan's Shintech Corporation chose St. James Parish to build the world's second largest raw plastics plant. St. James Parish is nearly half black, half white. Until yesterday, Shintech wanted to build in Romeville, near Convent. It's majority black. Parish high school graduation rates 3/4 in the area of the proposed plant. More people are less educated. Unemployment in this industrial river parish still 11%. Around where the plant would have gone, 62%. So maybe the plant would have done some good, not so fast. What's been the reaction among some residents when they had considered questions of pollution?
I wouldn't even bother to try. I wouldn't even bother to try to do nothing. They asked us for them other plants come up here, they asked us for nothing. And what can get that plant worse than the ones they already got? How many explosions they done had at them?
Sometimes they have a warning saying that something has escaped. We got to stay in the house and all that, in the air and all that.
We don't want an apology from the government in 15 years because of the Holocaust that are going on in our communities. This is environmental genocide at its worst.
The citizens group that fought Shintech is made up of ordinary citizens with, they say, ordinary incomes that would not support hiring a lawyer. Last year, they could, however, afford the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic.
That's not good for you, call us.
The clinic is 25 students practicing to be lawyers by practicing law on behalf of people who cannot afford to fight big companies. In the case of Shintech, however, these students took on more than a Japanese plastics firm. They wound up taking on the governor, the Secretary of Economic Development, the Department of Environmental Quality, Chambers of Commerce, and the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry.
What they were trying to do is hold this plant up to the point where it's economically feasible not to come here, and they're going somewhere else. And Louisiana's going to lose a bunch of jobs.
Governor Mike Foster, in an interview for this program, said he would take a look at Tulane's tax-exempt status and called on the school's alumni to review clinic activities.
It's P-I-G-O-T.
This group decides they're going to be the law themselves. It's almost like they are the vigilantes out there doing this on their own, and I don't think it's right.
This summer, business backers asked the state Supreme Court to review the rules under which environmental and other law school clinics operate. In a June decision, the court stunned law students and teachers like Tulane's clinic director, Robert Kuhn.
For 20 years, the clinics have been representing working class families, working poor, people who might not be on public assistance, but surely by no stretch of the imagination do they have the thousands and thousands of dollars lying around to hire attorneys when they get in a legal problem. The new rule severely restricts the individuals that clinics can represent and requires those individuals to demonstrate that they meet the very strictest poverty guidelines in America. And so not only is it not simply a clarification of the rule, it's also a restriction that is more severe than any other state in the country. And on the issue of group representation, for years, clinics have been representing nonprofit community organizations on issues relating to consumer issues, environmental issues, civil rights issues. Never with any problem, clearly within the scope of the rule. And now the court has put a requirement of indigency on the members of the organization such that, quite frankly, I'm not sure whether more than at most 1 or 2 groups in the state might qualify.
Sam LeBlanc heads the Chamber of Commerce for New Orleans and the River region. He says the Supreme Court is merely stressing existing law clinic rules.
For instance, the dean of the Southern Law School has said, we can operate under these rules. So it's become, again, a controversial public relations, publicity, celebrity matter, more than anything else.
Because the clarification that you got really only stressed again what their rules were in the first place, as to what their role was and who they can represent.
That's correct. That is correct.
These rules were on the book.
That is exactly correct. But you have to go and check the record to see. You have to see what was requested and what came out. And nobody's doing that. Nobody who has ever interviewed me has done that. And of course it's not going to be brought up by the law clinics, because if it was brought up by the law clinics, it would quash the controversy. And controversy is what is wanted, unfortunately. Instead of progress in getting people jobs and improving the economic situation in our state and perforce the educational situation, they're satisfied with controversy, to have it on TV, to have it in the newspapers, to keep it going.
While environmentalists decry it all as political kowtowing to industry, a fierce election is underway for a term on the Supreme Court. A 25-year incumbent, Chief Justice Pascal Calagaro, has been a fighter for pro bono representation of indigents and the poor. Curiouser and curiouser, his critics say, is the court's unanimous decision concerning whom the law clinics may represent. Calagaro says if you think the court is buckling down on the clinics, you should see the list of clamps business and industry wanted to employ, but his court denied.
I think they wanted about 10 different propositions considered. One, they would have required balanced representation of government, small business, and environmental interests by student attorneys. No, you
Which would obviously be a conflict of interest. You can't
do that. We told them no. They wanted to compel regular communication with the client and representation of the client above those of the student attorney or law clinic, because they suspected there was an agenda in a clinic unrelated to the real disaster. No, we don't make other lawyers come up and tell us how they're communicating with their clients. They wanted to require screening and approval of matters undertaken by law clinics to see to some supervisory group. Well, we said no, the law clinics can handle their own business. They wanted to say that the student would be the primary spokesperson at all hearings and the professor can't open his mouth. No. If you can have adequate representation in a clinical circumstance, the professor can handle the case entirely if he chooses. We turned him down on 7 or 8 different situations. What we did, however, was find that under the rule that existed, there was not, it was simply not being complied with.
I think to suggest that this is just a clarification is not just wrong, it's disingenuous. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were rolling back the availability of legal assistance to working families in the state.
What does it do to your client base when they have to prove their incomes? Because part of the ruling is that 51%, not just a majority, but 51% have to be at a certain federal cutoff for impoverished or indigent incomes.
I think that when we make it a condition of someone to participate in a public debate that they have to reveal their income, we have clearly sent a signal that we don't value community participation, and we have also surely engaged in a requirement now that will chill participation or scare people away. Because you can imagine anyone, if you were thinking of joining an organization for some civic purpose or political purpose or social purpose, and they sent you back a form and said, you know, we'd be glad to have you as a member, but you need to reveal your income to us. I think there are very few people that would then go forward joining that group.
Is it possible there is in this state an alliance between business development, the chamber, and government that doesn't want any obstacles, that doesn't want these students throwing up roadblocks to economic development?
I don't think that in some instances the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic has really gone out to protect the environment. I think they've gone out to make a name for themselves, to stop anything, period, for whatever reason. We did not ever, and I got to make this clear, we have never attempted to have any clinic, the Tulane Environmental Law Clinic or any environmental law clinic, stop from having the laws enforced. Never. Quite the contrary. We support that because it's good for everybody. It helps to create jobs. It helps to clean up the environment.
I think that they don't understand two things. One is that the ruling that the Supreme Court issued affects, in the end, all of us, because all of us, at some point or other, may need an attorney, or all of us at some time or the other surely would identify with someone, whether they're a family member or a friend or a co-worker who also needs a legal assistance and who now can't turn to a clinic. I also think that the thing that isn't being understood is that the ruling of the court is directly contrary to what lawyers are taught. Lawyers are taught...
And swear to do.
And swear to do. Lawyers are taught and swear to try to advance the availability of legal services to those who can't afford it, and to ensure that legal representation is not denied someone simply because they may adopt a position that's unpopular or subject to disapproval. And unfortunately, that's exactly what's been happening in Louisiana.
Now in our quality of life section, a follow-up to an ongoing LPB investigation into oil field waste. In Lafourche Parish, sludge pits of oil field byproducts have nearby residents complaining. And environmentalists say that the way Louisiana polices oil field sludge under our Rule 29B is some of the weakest policing in the country. Last month, the people of Grand Bois, where a large waste pit is located, had their day in court. They sued the waste pit owner and Exxon, asking for $80 million for widespread health complaints. Diana Baker has the verdict.
They stayed a couple hours to settle, and what they did, they came into this driveway, and they backed up their trucks to cell 11 here. And they undid the back latches on the trucks and just dumped the sludge out, and they ran to the front of their trucks. And they were in the moon suits and everything else.
Rusty was, what, 5, 6 at the time? He started grabbing his face. I mean, that's how volatile it was. And Mama said by the time she got to the house, she was in the middle of the yard. She went directly in the bathroom, began throwing up. She said it was that bad.
It's a legal loophole, but this waste is hazardous. But yet they have the right to call it not hazardous. I don't care what you call it, but don't let people be exposed to it. Your state agencies are letting people be exposed to this waste and, you know, just calling it non-hazardous. That is wrong of your state agency. That is wrong.
Over the last year, accusations and controversy have swirled around this tiny community in South Louisiana known as Grand Bois. In 1984, the state of Louisiana provided a permit for a corporation to dispose of oil field waste next to their community. Now, this once obscure township that enjoyed a quiet life has been thrust into the limelight by residents' allegations of toxic exposure, corporate conspiracy, and cover-ups by state agencies.
I want to get to the bottom of it. If there's something bad going on, I want to know what it is. I want it to stop. And if it can't be stopped immediately, then we want to shut the facility down.
Last month, the residents of Grand Bois took their complaints to court. The first of a series of trials for 10 of the 300 plaintiffs ended with mixed results. The defendants were Exxon Corporation and Campbell Wells, the owner of the oil field waste facility. After damaging testimony, Campbell Wells quickly negotiated a settlement with the residents. The terms of the deal are sealed, but involve both compensation to the plaintiffs as well as minor changes in the buffer zone between the open waste pits and the residents. This left Exxon alone to defend itself against claims of toxic exposure to the residents. Many onlookers watched in disbelief as the industrial giant with deep pockets refused to settle the case. Plaintiffs' attorneys had asked the jury for over $80 million in punitive damages.
In this trial, I'm happy with the way our attorneys handled our case. You know, the jury's seen it in a different light, but as far as us beating Campbell Wells and Exxon, we did. Just when the jury went to deliberate, I don't know what happened.
Within days, the trial was over. After just 8 hours of deliberation, the Thibodaux jury returned a resounding no to almost all of the allegations against Exxon. 3 of the 10 residents were awarded a total of only $130,000. 7 of the Grambois plaintiffs got nothing. But most telling of all, the jury didn't order Exxon to pay a penny in punitive damages.
I honestly don't believe that the jury understood exactly what that meant. Is that these people had to be punished for what they've done. I mean, even though it was legal, I mean, Exxon knew.
How can they punish somebody when they did what was legal? That's the whole key.
Yeah, but I mean, legal or not legal, common sense could tell you that if this stuff had benzene at this level and hydrogen sulfide was suspected.
Yeah, but you were in a court of law.
Yes.
Dr. Mike Robichaud serves the people of Grambois as a physician and state senator.
Every time they addressed an issue that was a legal issue that they had to decide on, the first thing they had to ask themselves, was it illegal? And the answer to that was constantly, no, it wasn't illegal. They didn't do anything that was against the law, because they wrote the law.
The surprise verdict left plaintiffs' attorneys wondering whether they should continue to try the remaining cases for the other 290 Grambois residents. Whether the trials continue in Thibodaux state courts or not, the Grambois controversy has already caused changes in the way Louisiana state agencies monitor so-called non-hazardous oil field waste.
Yeah. The whole subject of Grambois has, in my opinion, been one that the more I learned about it, the more concerned I became about it. I'm concerned for a number of reasons. Number one, that it's been around for quite a while. It has a life of its own, and nobody seemed to have any answers.
In the face of industry concerns, Governor Foster issued an emergency ruling last spring and called in help from state and federal agencies.
And on May the 1st of this year, some emergency rules were established. Now, understand that for an emergency rule to be invoked, the public or the environment has to be in imminent peril. So it has to be in a true emergency, and there has to be a situation involved in which someone's life or the environmental situation is such that it's critical.
The state agency that regulates the oil and gas industry is the Department of Natural Resources. With the 29B emergency ruling, the DNR was charged with monitoring the samples of all oil field waste coming to Louisiana. Jack Caldwell is secretary for the Department of Natural Resources.
Yeah, we're cutting new ground, no question about that. No one has ever done the study that we're doing on the scope that we're doing it on and the processes that we're examining.
The sampling program is the first of its kind in America and requires the analysis of the waste both at its point of origin as well as at its arrival at the waste treatment facilities. The raw sampling data is sent to the Department of Natural Resources and published on the internet. The test results are then analyzed by LSU scientists. Dr. James Wharton heads up the team that will make recommendations to the state on how oil field waste should be handled in the future.
There have been studies of oil field waste in the past, from the late 1980s on to the present. And so far we're getting similar results to what's been found in the past. We are looking at a number of different waste streams, and we're finding that the metals don't seem to be a major problem. And on the other hand, the volatile organic compounds can be a problem in some of the waste streams.
One thing I want to commend the state for doing, Secretary Caldwell for doing, they put all this stuff on the internet, and it's in a database, and I've been able to access the database.
Dr. Mike Robichaud has been doing his own number crunching and has published a series of reports he'll present to the Oilfield Waste Advisory Committee.
And the report called for, well, the report explained that out of 600-something specimens, it showed fairly conclusively, the data did, that we had the associated waste stream, which is a small volume, limited volume waste stream, had some very toxic characteristics to it. And in analyzing this data, most of the problems was in the area of benzene. And benzene's a known carcinogen, and it's a highly toxic material. We have one specimen that had 15,000 milligrams per liter of benzene in it, okay? The highest allowed by the EPA in any other industrial setting except the oil and gas industry is 0.5 milligrams, which means it is 30,000 times more concentrated than benzene would be allowed in an industry. That means that those workers handling that benzene right now are not told anything about it. They do not know that it's hazardous. They do not have to take any special precautions or anything. I mean, it's ludicrous. Now, I think the state has this information right now. It is imperative. It is critical. It is absolutely, positively important that we inform, if not the companies, because the companies know this already, that these people, the workers, are working around this material and make some appropriate adjustments to avoiding exposure.
For now, the recent court case between the residents of Grand Bois and Exxon seems to have shown that until the laws are changed, those who live near waste sites or work in the oil fields have no protection or recourse.
If they become ill because of it, it is not against the law. If they can have something 30,000 times as toxic and not be required to let the worker, your husband, my wife, my sons, whatever else who are working with this material, know about it. And if they get sick, there's nothing we can do about it because it's not against the law. We learned that from Good Old Boy.